Alright guys, so today I want to talk about something that just interests me. I'm going to start a series called Tolkien Theories. Now I'm going to just throw it out there. I'm not a Tolkien expert. I've not read all the material. I've not did a deep study into it. And most of your YouTube channels that talk about this kind of stuff, they've just done all the research and they've looked deep into everything and they're telling you what Tolkien actually said in this letter, in that book, which is awesome, and I like to watch that kind of stuff. But that's not what this is going to be about. This is going to be kind of what if scenarios, giving my opinion, what I think, kind of where Tolkien stopped. He just didn't have a chance to finish a thought, finish a story. I'm going to tell you, based on the evidence and based on what I've seen and read, what I think the answer is, or what would have happened, or a what if scenario. So today in episode 1 of Tolkien Theories, I'm just going to rank the top 20 elves in Tolkien's legendarium. I'm going to explain at the beginning what my criteria is and why I'm ranking them the way that I am. It's obviously just my opinion, okay? But I just love the elves. The elves are my favorite part of the story. When it comes to the Silmarillion or whatever, I just love the elves. When I first watched Lord of the Rings, the very first thing that I picked up on is how much I loved Legolas. So if you've only read the Lord of the Rings, or especially if you've only watched the Lord of the Rings movies, you're not going to know who these people are. But just keep in mind that way back in the first age, and even before, there were some powerful elves. Okay, so just to explain pretty quickly my thought process and the criteria that I go by. Generally speaking, the older the elf is, the more powerful. Just simply life experience, more time, training, becoming more powerful, learning, whatever the case. Generally speaking, the elves that had a bent in them to want to go to Valinor, to want to be with the Valar, those elves are more powerful, in my opinion. So the Teleri, for instance, are not going to be as powerful as the Noldor. The Noldor are not going to be quite as powerful as the Vanyar, generally speaking. And then I believe there's a power, an innate amplifying power that came from the two trees during the years of the trees. And not only people who have been in that presence of those two trees are more powerful, but I think especially those that were born into it. So you think of Eleuthingol, Elwë, he obviously went and saw the two trees, and it definitely did something to him. It amplified his power, so to speak. But I think those that were born into that, they were literally born, that's all that they knew for thousands of years was the light of these two trees. I think those might be the most powerful. Those original elves that came to be in pairs, and then they split off into 3 groups, and we're not sure how long, of course, they had been going, but they definitely had been around for a while. Orome finally found them, and the journey began to get them back. At that time, when Orome found them, they picked 3 people to be their leaders: Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë. And here's my theory. I'm going to say they picked those 3 because they were the most powerful, most noble, most honorable, just the best of the best. And then later, after they came back and gave the report of the Undying Lands, they become the kings of those 3 tribes. So direct descendants of those 3 people are going to be a lot of the people on this list. In fact, almost all of them. That's a general explanation of kind of where I'm thinking of these things and how I'm coming up with these rankings. And there are exceptions, of course. There's plenty of elves that probably are more powerful than these. They're just never talked about. So this is not all encompassing. This is just the elves that we know of. And then one last thing just to note is that I'm really referring to their potential. So you look at an elf like Galadriel. She lived a long, long time. And by the end of her life, she was extremely powerful. And then you think of another elf that didn't live as long, but maybe innately they were more powerful. So I'm thinking of their innate potential, not so much in the actual deeds that they accomplished. 5 honorable mentions: Gil-galad, Celebrimbor, Arundel, Elwing, and Olwe. Olwe is Elway's brother, who is, at the end of the story, he is still the king of the Teleri elves in Valinor. Elwing and Arundel both are half elves that end up becoming full elves once they reach Valinor, of course, right before the War of Wrath. Very powerful. They are honorable mentions, but their bloodlines are extremely important to the story. Celebrimbor, the grandson of Feanor that helped Sauron create the Rings of Power. Definitely you have to give him a shout out. And then Gil-galad, an extremely important elf in the Second Age. Those are honorable mentions. All right, let's start at number 20, Elrond. Now, Elrond lived a long, long time, especially in Middle-earth, did a lot of great things, but he's only 20 on this list just because of simply his innate power. Now, Elros would also be the exact same. However, he chose to be a man, and Elrond chose to be an elf. Speaking of Elwing and Arundel, it's his mom and dad. Just a really cool character. One of the most important characters, and very powerful. Although he wasn't one to, I think, look for violence first, he was more of a peaceful elf, healing elf. Just very powerful. And the fact that he's number 20 should tell you how ridiculously powerful some of Tolkien's elves are. All right, number 19, Dior. This is the son of Beren Luthien. Very powerful elf, lived during the First Age. Now, his mom, being half elf, half Maya, definitely boosts him up. In fact, you might think he should be higher up. But his dad just full out human, and so that does bring him back down. He was killed in a battle with some of Feanor's sons. However, I think he definitely deserves to be in the top 20. Just not a ton is known about him. In fact, he should be higher, but I'm going to go with Dior, number 19. Number 18, Círdan. It's really hard to gauge Círdan. He definitely is one of the oldest elves, if not the oldest elf that we know of. He never did see the light of Valinor until he sailed there on the last ship. But he definitely has been around a long, long, long time. And that just innately gives him, I think, lots of power. He was more of a person who had tremendous wisdom and foresight. He just knew what was going to happen. He had tremendous wisdom, and it seems like, had a great relationship with Valinor, even though he was across the sea. He definitely worked in tandem with them and built ships so that he could send people to the Undying Lands. So definitely Círdan, number 18. Beleg, number 17. Beleg Strongbow. Beleg is one of those that never reached Valinor, never tried. Grew up in Doriath under King Eleuthingol. Him and maybe one other person would be right there as the most powerful elves that was underneath Eleuthingol. Just a spoiler alert, Legolas is not in this list. As cool as of characters he is, he just doesn't compare to some of these older First Age and Second Age elves. But if you're looking for a quote-unquote dark elf who never reached Valinor, who is just top class, instead of Legolas, really it would be Beleg. Beleg is just an amazing, and unfortunately the way he died really sucks. But really you never read of any time where he was bested by anybody. And he, with Thorin, his friend, loved to fight, loved to kill orcs, loved to just do the right thing. He was really a cool elf. Unfortunately, his ending really sucked, but he definitely deserves to be in here. Glorfindel, number 16. Now, some of you might have thought I would rank him higher, but just based on my thought process I laid out at the beginning, his innate power, potential, I would rank him 16th. Glorfindel is one of those exceptions. He's really this high just simply because of the things that he did. Let's assume he was born in Valinor. Very powerful elf. He definitely came over here and, did amazing things was under Turgon and the Hidden City, and him and Ecthelion were two just amazing warriors that served under Turgon. He did some amazing things, including killing a Balrog, although similar to Gandalf, it killed him in the process. Now, when he came back, when he was sent back, he probably was more boosted in power, and he might be higher up the list, but I'm just going by his original power level given to him just from his organic life, not really the boosted version of himself coming back. But just based on his deeds, just a really, really cool elf. Number 15, Maglor. Now, Feanor had 7 sons, of course. The 2 oldest are on this list. The other ones might be on the list too. I just don't know for sure. I don't have enough information to go by that. But I do know that his 2 oldest sons, Maedhros and Maglor, were very powerful, never did get defeated. They were there till the very end of the First Age. And Maglor never did die. I mean, that we know of. We're not really sure what happened to him. Of the 7 sons of Feanor, the 2 oldest, I like the most, probably had the most honor. And then of those 2, Maglor was the best. He had more of a kind heart, probably more like his uncles than his dad. But you can't deny who he was, his lineage, everything else. Born in Valinor, very powerful. I think he definitely deserves to be up there. Number 14, Galadriel, daughter of Finarfin, daughter of Finwë. So the first king of the Noldor, Finwë, his granddaughter Galadriel, born in Valinor, under the light of the 2 trees. In fact, her hair was one of the things that Feanor was inspired by to create the Silmarils. And so, definitely powerful. We don't see her in the Legendarium really ever fighting with swords and things like that, but always just tons of power, tons of experience. And because of who she is and where she came from, she definitely needs to be on this list. Some people will say, yeah, but didn't Tolkien at one time say she was like one of the most powerful of all time? Maybe just right under Feanor. Maybe, but I think it was mainly because of how long she lived, not only in Valinor, but in Middle-earth, and all the things she accomplished. So, going back to what I said, this is more about the potential, not so much the things they experienced. If Fingolfin, for instance, had not died and lived as long as Galadriel, he definitely would have did some amazing things and continued to grow in power. And so I don't think just on the things she did and how long she lived, she should get the bump over other ones. This is more their potential. And having said that, perfect segue into number 13, her brother, Finrod. Didn't live as long in Middle-earth, for sure. He died in the First Age. But I would say he's more powerful than Galadriel, at least his potential when he died. Incredible things that he did. Not just fighting, but just cities and places that he built and he started. And just his relationship with the dwarves, his relationship with the first humans, just incredible. But I think just, the older brother of Galadriel, Finarfin's son, born in Valinor, he originally had the ring that become the ring of Barahir that Aragorn has. Just, I think he's higher up than Galadriel. So I'm going to give him number 13. All right, number 12, Turgon. Turgon was really good friends with his first cousin, Finrod. Very similar, great at leading, great at building cities, things like that. Very powerful. This is Fingolfin's second son. Of course, he created the city of Gondolin, did amazing things. We don't really read him specifically having a fight where we see his power level, but just who he was and where he came from. He should be right up there with these ones I've been talking about, potentially higher. And number 11, his brother Fingon. And I'm only putting Fingon above Turgon, just simply he was older. him and Mydros were really close. I feel like had been around a while, just had more experience, potentially more powerful. He did fight Gothmog and, held his own. It was only because another Balrog got behind him, and he ended up dying, of course, but a very powerful elf. His dad was Fingolfin. And so for all the reasons I've already talked about, I just feel like he would be number 11. Number 10, Ecthelion. Now, Ecthelion is one of these exceptions that I talked about. He's kind of like Glorfindel. He definitely came from Valinor, born in Valinor. However, he's not from the line of one of the three kings, not from Ingwe, Finwë, or Thingol. But just based on what he did, he slew Gothmog, the head of all the Balrogs. That alone's got to get you in the top 10. Innately, I don't know. He's an exception. There's a few of these in this list. He's an exception where just because he wasn't, the son of Finwë or the son of Ingwe doesn't mean he ain't the most powerful. And we don't know. He could be number one for all I know. But just based on my theories and just based on the things I've explained, he can't be the most powerful. Probably not. But look at what he did. So he's definitely in the top 10. Once again, don't forget this is their potential, not the deeds that they did. Number 9, Mydros. Now, he technically had a little stint where he was king of the Noldor. However, he was hanging by one arm on the side of a mountain during that time. I would say him and Maglor were the two wisest of the sons of Feanor. Once he was rescued by his cousin Fingon, he had enough wisdom to relinquish the kingship of the Noldor to his uncle Fingolfin. But he was always active, and him and Fingolfin, and then later him and Fingon, had a neat relationship where the Feanorian elves kind of did their thing, and the rest of the elves kind of followed Fingolfin more directly, but they would tag team and team up for certain battles. He never was beaten, except for when he was betrayed at the little meeting he had with Morgoth and hung up on the side of the mountain. And you never read where he was beaten. He might have been part of an overall battle where they lost, but he was always one of the holdouts. He was always one that made it, survived, and moved on. He's a survivor. Even when some of the kin slayings later happened and some of his brothers were killed, he always survived. And like I talked about with Maglor, they survived all the way to the end of the First Age and did get the Silmarils back, actually completed their mission, but then they weren't worthy to have them, and Mydros killed himself. But Mydros is a powerful, powerful elf, so he's number 9. I've mentioned his name many times, Thingol, number 8. So, of the three, Ingwe, Finwë, Elwë, who later changed his name to Thingol, I would say he's the weaker of those three, just based on the willingness of the elves to go to Valinor, which the Vanyar would have been the first and foremost, and then the Teleri last. That generally kind of tells you the power level that I'm going with in my theory. Now, he did go to Valinor for a short time, see the light of the two trees. He would get that power boost. But he came back and he never returned. Now, after spending that trance time with Melian that he did, that gave him a boost too, where people thought he was a Maya. He was definitely the most powerful Teleri elf ever, and could hold his own against pretty much, I would say, almost all of the Noldor elves too. So extremely powerful elf. Him and his wife made an incredible kingdom of Doriath, which lasted until Doriath lasted for so long. There was times that he made some weird decisions. He might not have always been the best guy, but no question he was a powerful elf. All right, number 7, Finwë. I just talked about how of the 3 first kings, you'd have to give the nod to Ingwe first, then Finwë, then Thingol. So, to no surprise, number 7 is Finwë. He was picked of all the Noldor elves to be the first king. He went to Valinor, lived in Valinor for so long. I don't think he is as powerful as his children would be because they were born into the light of the two trees and he wasn't. Just look at his sons, Feanor, Fingolfin. These, when you have sons that are this powerful, there has to be something about you. Just his potential was incredible, I think. Unfortunately, we don't really get to know much about him. You know, we hear that Fingolfin talked to him about Feanor, and we hear this, but we don't really hear a whole lot. We just know that his first wife died. You know, not really died, but gave up her own life. And then we know that he married another Vanyar elf and had more children. But we don't really hear about, the story never tells us something that he did or he thought from his own point of view. We never got to hear it from him, unfortunately. But just look at who he is. Look at his kids. He was picked to be king for a reason. Look at how powerful his kids were. He has to be in there. All right, number 6 is Ingweon. Now, like I said, the Vanyar are typically, I would call the most powerful, all things being equal. There are exceptions, just because they were the first. They were always the head class, and they made the best decisions because they were just the closest to what, you know, the Valar and Eru wanted them to be. So I just typically give them the nod, then the Nolnor, then the Teleri. But now, why is he not more powerful up the list than, say, some of Finway's children that I haven't talked about yet? Well, the main reason is, if you really dig deep, I believe he is actually older than them. And I think Ingwe had already had him as a son and lived in Middle-earth when Orome found them. So I believe he was born in Middle-earth, took the journey, obviously lived during the whole time of the two trees, and then all the way to the present day. But the fact he was not born in Valinor, I just feel like that was a very special thing, that to be born into Valinor in the light of the two trees was more special than just being in their presence. So the fact he's older actually helps him, right? Because I said the older they are, the more powerful generally. But I just feel like some of Finway's sons being born into that undying land with the light of the two trees just gives him a little boost. So I'm going to go ahead and pick Ingweon as number 6. And therefore, Ingwe, number 5. So his dad, right? Now, because Ingwe and Ingweon were both not born in Valinor, you have to give the edge to the older one, the father. He's the first king of the Vanyar, and really he's king over all elves everywhere, really. They picked him for a reason. I believe he's a direct descendant of the very first elf ever, you know, the oldest son to the oldest son. And so he's definitely got to be up there, right? He's definitely got to be top 5. And like I said, usually the children born into Valinor, I give the edge than just being in the light. However, I think because Ingweon was born prior, was born in Middle-earth, I will give the edge to Ingwe. Ingwe, we don't really know his potential. He could be number 1 for all we know. He's definitely got to be in the top 5. But he's extremely powerful. I wish we knew more about him. But I mean, he's the head elf of all elves. He's the king of all elves. And he lives basically just in the same mountain as Manwë, the king of all Valar, in Valinor. So he's as high up as you can possibly go on the totem pole. As far as his innate potential, I'm going to put him at number 5. Here's an exception. I mean, if you've listened to my logic and my criteria, you kind of can figure out where I'm going with this. But there's been a few exceptions, and here's another exception. Number 4, Luthien. Now, her dad is an elf, obviously, and a very powerful elf, Eleuthingol, who was number 8 on this list. But her mom was a Maya, okay? And so when your mom's a Maya, so you're half Maya and you're half very powerful elf, that is going to show you how powerful that she is. Her pet, which I know this isn't directly correlating to her power, but her pet defeated Sauron. She put Melkor to sleep with her singing. I mean, her power level is off the charts, really. And it's just hard to really tell because, she was just someone who sang and someone who was just beautiful. It never talks about her fighting or anything, but her power was just off the charts. Now, you might say, well, with her being half Maya, shouldn't she be number one? So we know that Maya and elves, there's an overlap. Some elves were more powerful than some Maya. We clearly see Glorfindel kills a Balrog, though the Balrog kills him. And the Balrogs were Maya that Melkor changed. We know Gandalf, who's a Maya, killed a Balrog. Once again, died in the process. We know that Ecthelion killed the head of the Balrogs. In fact, the most powerful Balrog ever. So we know that it can be done. We know that Feanor fought multiple Balrogs. So it's clear that some of the most powerful elves were just as powerful as some of the Maya. So to say that Luthien should automatically be number one because she's half Maya, I disagree with. Though she's definitely number 4, right? Can't be a ton of people that's more powerful. Keep in mind, as powerful as Luthien was, she never saw the light of the 2 trees, so she never got that power boost. So, but still, being half Maya, right? So who could be more powerful than Luthien? Well, I've got 3 people. You've probably figured it out, though I think number 3 is going to throw you for a loop. But based on what I've said, right? If you've seen the light of the 2 trees, that gives you an immediate advantage, a power boost. And if you were born into that light, not just went there and saw it, but you were literally born into it, that gives you a power boost. And then if you're from one of the first 3 kings, Ingwe, Finwë, or Elwë, Thingol, that's going to give you a power boost. So the final 3 are going to meet that category, right? Now, let's just talk about them. It's obviously the 3 sons of Finwë. I think that they're 1, 2, and 3. Before I describe who's number 1, who's number 2, who's number 3, let me just explain something. So Finwë had Feanor, of course, with his wife, and I'll get to him in a second, but unbelievably powerful elf. Then he married the niece, I believe, either niece or granddaughter. I think it's the niece of Ingwe. So Finwë is the king of the Noldor, the most powerful Noldor, and then he marries the niece of the most powerful Vanyar. Ingwe probably more powerful than Finwë. So the sons of Finwë on his second marriage are half Noldor, half Vanyar, and come from both the lines of Finwë, the king of the Noldor, and Ingwe, king of the Vanyar. And those 2 sons are Fingolfin and Finarfin. Okay? So the number 3 on my list, which this might have threw you for a loop and you might not have saw this coming, is Finarfin. I think that Finarfin is the number 3 most powerful elf in all the Legendarium. Now here's the reason I say no one would have probably expected me to say that, is you never see him fighting, you never hear of anything he does, except for during the War of Wrath. He did come back and lead the Noldor that had never left. So he did come to Middle-earth and help lead the forces along with Ingweon and Eonwë, the Herald of Manwë, and a great force of awesome, other elves, and possibly Maya. So he did come and lead that campaign. But all we really ever hear is how of the 3 brothers of Finwë, he was kind of the most chill, the most easygoing, the one that had the most wisdom, the one that was closer to what the Valar wanted them to be. So we don't really know of anything specifically he did. Why would he be all the way at number 3? Well, I've kind of already said it, right? His father's Finwë, king of the Noldor. His mom is from the royal line of the Vanyar, so he's half Vanyar, half Noldor, born into the time of the 2 trees. How can you be more powerful? Well, I guess you'd have to be the older brother, Fingolfin, because he's number 2. Fingolfin is number 2. All those same things I said about Finarfin, and then just a little bit older, is Fingolfin. Now, Fingolfin, we know great things that he did. Tolkien said this about Fingolfin: he was the strongest, most steadfast, and most valiant. And it makes sense. All the things I've explained, he just had the most innate potential and was a great guy, a great leader. Not perfect, not as chill as his brother Finarfin, but definitely fearless and an incredible warrior, right? And of course, my favorite, scene of the entire Silmarillion is when he went to fight Melkor. I hate the way it ended because I wish that Fingolfin would have continued in the story longer. But man, it was written so awesome by Tolkien. Basically embarrassed Morgoth, who was scared of him to a degree. Permanently wounded Morgoth. Did lose, but my gosh. So half Vanyar, half Noldor, born into the two trees. The most powerful elf of all time. Based on all the things I've said, he has the most potential, the most powerful, except one. Now, I said there's several exceptions, and the number one is a little bit of an exception. Feanor. Feanor is number one, okay? Now, he's right there with Fingolfin as far as being Finwë's son, but he's the older son, and he was born under the two trees. So all those things are like Fingolfin. The reason I say he's a bit of an exception is I feel like Finwë's second wife, being the niece of Ingwe of the Vanyar, gives a little bit of a potential edge to Fingolfin and Finarfin. However, not in this case, because it's just he's full-blooded Noldor, but he was an exception. I don't know if Tolkien was thinking that Eru, the god of this world, had some kind of hand to play in it, or if it was just completely by chance. But for whatever reason, something happened with Feanor that didn't happen with anyone else, with any other elf. He basically was just born ultra powerful, as if like 5 elves put into one. So much so that the energy that was drained from his mother just in giving birth to him caused her death. The first elf to ever die in Valinor. And she died not because she was killed, but because she just lost the will to live. So the amount of energy it took just to give birth to Feanor was incredible. Once again, I don't know if that was from Eru, if he designed it that way, or if it was just a freak chance. But he was by far the most powerful elf. Here's what Tolkien said about Feanor. He was made the mightiest in all parts of body and mind, in valor, in endurance, in beauty, in understanding, in skill, in strength, and subtlety alike, of all the children of Iluvatar, and a bright flame was in him. So he is the greatest. Tolkien just flat out says he's the greatest. Why he was born so powerful, I don't know. But he was the greatest. Tolkien says a bright flame was in him. In fact, when he died, that flame was just like the power that was in him came out of his dead body. It was just like, wow, what was up with this guy? He created the Palantir. He created the Silmarils. He improved on languages. I mean, he was the smartest in just every way. He was the greatest elf. Now, my personal favorite elf is Fingolfin. Now, you might ask yourself, okay, maybe Feanor was the most powerful in a lot of ways, but the most powerful warrior was Fingolfin. Maybe. I would say that if Feanor and Fingolfin went one-on-one, battle to the end, around the time that Fingolfin fought Melkor, I think that Fingolfin would have beat him. But the potential, once again, is where this top 20 comes from. And so I feel like at that moment, yes, Fingolfin would have beat him. But his raw natural potential was there, that if he would have just went on a training spree, he could have passed anybody. So I think that Feanor is the most powerful elf. This has been fun. It's just me giving my opinion. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe. If if I see people subscribing, if I see people giving me thumbs up, that makes me want to produce more content. It's fun just to talk about this stuff. I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear where I went wrong, because I'm sure those of you that watch this some will agree, some will disagree. Put your top 20 list in the comments below, or at least put the top 10. Who do you think is the most powerful elves? This has been really fun. Hopefully you have a great day. And until next time, take care.